have a message from the UK. Lord David Alton, first elected as a member of Parliament in 1979, crossbench peer of the House of Lords in 97, Lord Alton has been a vocal advocate and a friend for the people of Tigray. He is calling for action today in the House of Lords. Please stay tuned for the live coverage. Please cue the report. The screen is yours.
Hello, I'm David Alton. I serve in the British Parliament, and I try to use the opportunities that I have here to raise the situation of places like Tigray, which I think is a neglected and forgotten part of the world, and yet the most terrible atrocities have been occurring, and often going by default, with little being said here at Westminster about the plight of the people of Tigray. So I'm taking part in this 24-hour vigil, this opportunity to raise the plight of Tigray, urging people to contact members of both houses of Parliament in order that they can use the power and the opportunity that they have to speak out, but also to contact government ministers so that they in turn will raise the position of Tigray at the United Nations Security Council. Britain, of course, has a permanent place at the Security Council and has this chance to raise the plight of Tigray. And I'm sorry that the UK has failed to do that so far. So wherever you may be listening to this today, use an email, write to an MP at the UK Parliament, it's easy to do, and say to them, please, will you urge the British government to raise the plight of Tigray at the highest levels? Why should they be doing that? Because terrible atrocities have been taking place. Only this week, both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have talked about the crimes against humanity which have been taking place in Tigray. There are reports of massacres. There are also terrible reports of refugee camps being leveled to the ground, of people who'd escaped from Eritrea to Tigray, now on the move yet again, joining the 70 million people who are displaced or are refugees worldwide. And some of those people have had to flee to Sudan. And we know from the stories that they have given to journalists that dreadful experiences have occurred. There's been sexual violence, rape of women, disembowelment, dreadful things, massacres. And it's crucially important that this evidence is collected and not forgotten. It should be used in prosecutions against those who have been responsible. Think back to the lessons of Darfur and Rwanda. I visited both at the time of the genocide in Darfur, and visited some of the villages that were razed to the ground, and stood in Rwanda alongside the mass graves where millions, literally millions of people were killed in an orgy of violence. In Darfur, more than 300,000 people were displaced, were murdered, and probably up to 2 million people were displaced. So we see these things repeating themselves again and again, and it shows the inability, the impotence of the international community in the face of such terrible crimes. In 1948, the Convention on the Crime of Genocide was created. It was the work of a man called Raphael Lemkin. He was a Jewish lawyer who had seen 49 of his own family who were killed in the Holocaust. He invented the word genocide, genes meaning the human family, side, the killing, the severing of that community. Instead of genocide, we need solidarity. We need to stand together, work with one another, support each other in ensuring that these terrible atrocities just don't go on in repeated cycles. And yet so often governments are more concerned about diplomacy or trade or big financial interests or appeasing governments in places like Ethiopia rather than standing for people who are suffering huge injustice in places like Tigray. So it's up to us to use the chances that we have, the opportunities we have, and also to be saying that, humanitarian aid should be reaching its destinations. And how do we know that that is happening unless we get access to those places? It has been absolutely scandalous that we haven't used the power that we have in places like the Security Council to demand access by international organizations right into the heart of Tigray, collecting evidence, but also ensuring that humanitarian aid actually reaches the people it is meant for. And we should be using things like the so-called Magnitsky sanctions, These are sanctions that can be directed at individuals who have been responsible for the perpetration of individual atrocities. You know, one day you might be a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but the next day you can be doing terrible things. And I think it's important that we hold to account whoever it is that's been responsible for the unfolding violence in Tigray. So let people be on their guard, that they should know that there will be a moment of accountability. There'll be a time when they will be brought to justice. And let them be clear that we in the international community will use all the opportunities that we have, both in Parliament, at governmental level, and at places like the Security Council. So now it's down to you and me to do all that we possibly can. It was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a great figure. He was a Protestant theologian who stood against the Nazis in Germany, who said that not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. He was executed by the Nazis for standing against them. The faith communities, the political communities must now stand together, and they must speak and act on behalf of the people of Tigray. Thank you for listening.